do you find hope at Christmas when Christmas can come for us at a dark time or an empty time or a dry time? That's what we're going to be discussing on Flourish-Meant today. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Flourish-Meant is sponsored by Access More.
Do you want to go deeper in your faith even while you're on the go? No matter how busy the season you're in, Access More has a library of faith-based podcasts to help you grow spiritually. With podcasts from Christian thought leaders such as Christine Kane, Lisa Harper, Taryn Wells, and Bob Goff. You can hear podcasts on religion, culture, family, entertainment, and so much more. Access More gives you a safe space to find inspiring conversations about faith. Start listening today at accessmore.com.
Today, I have the privilege of welcoming back Grace Fox, who is a popular Bible teacher and the author of 13 books, including brand new Fresh Hope for Today, Devotions for Joy on the Journey. And speaking of journeys, she lives on a sailboat in Vancouver, British Columbia. Welcome back, Grace. It's always a delight to chat with you.
Thanks so much for having me, Tina. It's great to see you again.
And we are reaching out with empathetic, compassionate hearts to those who are struggling at Christmas time with the idea of hope. Many people are living in bleak and difficult times, financially, emotionally, with their families, and in all areas of their lives. People are struggling more with anxiety, depression, addictions, family dysfunction, and all kinds of other issues. How do we find hope during a season that's supposed to be so cheerful? Do you think that sometimes it's hardest at Christmas for people to see what is supposed to be the meaning of Christmas?
I think so, Tina. I really believe that's true because at Christmas, when everything is supposed to be happy and bright and merry and glad, we may have just lost a loved one, or we may have lost our home, or our finances have just taken a severe downturn and we can't afford the presents. And then we feel the pressure to buy and to give to people who are maybe giving to us. And so you combine loss and grief and frustration or disappointment. You put all those things together, and Christmas can be a very tough time.
It can. And have you ever experienced that at Christmas time or another time in your life where you struggled to find hope?
Yeah, I can think of two in particular. The one situation was after my dad, he had had two major strokes, and the second one happened about the beginning of the second week of December. And so I dropped everything. He was hospitalized, and I drove out. It was about 12 hours drive. So I drove through the Rocky Mountains, through the snow and on the icy roads to get there to be with him for a few days. And then I had to turn around and drive home because I had children at home yet too, and I needed to be there for them. But that Christmas, thinking of my dad in a hospital bed, suffering after his second stroke, and now he was paralyzed on half of his body, knowing that my mom's future was now way up in the air. What would their future look like, and how would he recover? I did not feel like celebrating. I didn't even feel like putting a tree up, but I did it for the sake of my children. The second was in the Christmas of 2019. And I went for a walk with my husband. Our youngest daughter and her husband and their baby were there with us. And so we went for a walk, just waiting for the dinner to cook. And on that walk, I got a phone call. I thought it was just a greeting from my brother and sister-in-law. And it wasn't, hey, Merry Christmas. It wasn't that. It was, you are never going to believe what's happening over here. And I said, well, what is it? And again, they were 12 hours drive away. And they said, Mom phoned us this morning and said she thought she was having a stroke, and could we take her to the ER? They were all going to be together later that afternoon for Christmas dinner anyways, but they picked her up, took her to the ER, and that's where they spent most of the day. And when they called us, they said she has been diagnosed with a brain tumor the size of an egg. And so it wasn't a stroke. It was this tumor pushing on her brain. And so that was Christmas Day. And that was another hard thing to swallow. I didn't feel like going home and putting a dinner on after that walk. And I just didn't feel like celebrating, because there I thought of my mom and what's her life going to look like now, and how long is she going to live? And it was a very tough Christmas Day.
Did you find that you could quickly rebound and get hope with some quick little thing, or did you really have to have one simple thing to cling to get you through those times of suffering at Christmas?
That is a really good question, Tina. I personally don't think there are any little quick answers to rebound and get that feeling of celebration back. I That's my personal feeling because of what I've walked through. For me, it was a process. And I did need one thing, one nugget to hang on to. And that nugget that I clung to was from Isaiah 7:14, where it says his name will be called Immanuel, God with us. And I hung on to that. Okay, Immanuel, God with us. God is with us in the midst of this. He knows my pain. He knows my hurt. He knows my anxious thoughts as I think about, first it was dad and mom, and then it was mom and the rest of our family. And how are we going to walk through this? God with us. And that's what got me through.
And people forget that the story of Christmas isn't about how you're supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to be smiling. You're supposed to be happy. It's not about the supposed to be's. It's about God is with you where you are, isn't it?
It truly is. I mean, the promise is given all the way through scripture that do not be afraid, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. And those kinds of promises, but the promises he gave to Moses, he gave to Joshua, he gave to so many, to Abraham, to all these people, I am with you. And that promise is still ours today. And so when Jesus came and his name was Immanuel, God with us, God Almighty came down to earth in the form of man. I went to a missions conference called Urbana way back when I was just graduated from Bible college. And I always remember how they talked then about God moving into our neighborhood, God taking on the form of a human and moving into our neighborhood to live among us. And I love that expression or that visual of God in flesh moving in with us so that he could walk with us through life. And so when we're going through those hard times at Christmas, when everybody around us seems to be rejoicing and having a party and we don't feel like partying on the inside, we can still be comforted. That's the word I'm looking for. Find comfort in the fact that God is with us. He moved
Yes.
into our neighborhood.
He moved into our neighborhood in the darkest possible time as well. People forget as well that the original Christmas story doesn't take place in the upper class neighborhood. It doesn't take place where everybody's got all their finances together. It takes place among the poorest of the poor that didn't even have any place to stay other than the barn. They were stuck in a cave. They were made to put their baby into a feeding trough. They had rags to wrap their kid in. There was not this everything's all perfect Norman Rockwell Christmas during the first Christmas. This was dark times, and it was immediately followed by death, genocide of all the babies. I mean, the worst possible kind of murderous death that you can imagine happened right around the arrival of Immanuel. This is what Jesus came into. He came among us during the depths of darkness and evil and suffering and pain and loss.
That's right. And that message is for everyone. That message of hope is for everyone. God is with us. And I think about Mary and Joseph. I think about how they traveled to get to where they were, to Bethlehem. And yes, they were poor. And yes, they had nothing to their name, really. And then it was the shepherds that got the message, right? When the angels showed up and proclaimed that message of hope and joy to the shepherds. These were despicable people. They had that reputation of being crooked and just not people of integrity and so on. But these are the people who received that message with the angelic host. And so he didn't come into our perfect situations. He came into our mess. He came into our pain. And that's where he showed up. And so we can look at Christmas like that too, that, yeah, we don't have to have that Norman Rockwell Christmas, like you said. I love that, Tina. But we can welcome him into whatever situation we are in. He is there. He came for us in that mess.
And do you think it's harder because we feel pressured for everything to feel perfect, for us to always be cheerful, for everything to be picturesque and Pinterest ready? Do you think that makes it harder for people who are suffering at Christmas time?
Absolutely, because we feel that pressure to measure up. That's the word, to measure up. But then when we don't, we feel like we're not good enough, and then we go into that kind of thinking that says we're failures and I can't get anything right. I can't even do Christmas right. But that is not what Christmas is about. And the pressure, oh, I wish it would just go away, but it's there, and we have to figure out how we're going to walk through that as well. But if wouldn't it be nice if we could just say, forget the pressure, forget the commercialism, and just focus solely on the true meaning of Christmas, and that is Jesus Christ. But one other thing, Tina, that I've thought of over the years as I've thought about Christmas is how we tend to have Jesus. We picture him on Christmas cards or on the nativity scenes. He's always the baby in the manger. And I think it's helpful to also remember that, yes, he came as that baby who laid in the manger, who was helpless, the helpless baby who couldn't do a thing for himself, dependent on his mother and his father. But he also is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And to worship him as such in the middle of Christmas like that. And so when we're feeling like life has sort of kicked us to the curb or kicked us in the head, to remember that this Jesus, who is our focus at Christmas, is the King of Kings. He is sovereign over every detail of our lives, and he is the one who is our refuge and our strength and our safe place when we don't feel very safe.
I love that picture of him being our safe place. He knows what it's like for feeling helpless. He knows what that feels like because he made himself human. So that was the reason he came in the form that he did. So we can understand that he knows what it's like to be betrayed, to be beaten down, to suffer, to hurt, to experience loss and death, to know what it is to really grieve. Many people think that he lost his earthly father figure, Joseph, before he ended his life on earth. And that's why Mary was the only one seen during the crucifixion time. So we don't hear much about Joseph later on in his life. So he went through deaths in the family himself. He went through being someone who lost his friends. People turned away from him. He went through being spat upon, people trying to throw stones at him. So when we go through things, we can recognize that he understands what that pain is like. It isn't just coming to us from a high place or a low place as baby Jesus and the little baby Jesus in the manger, little helpless baby Jesus. But he also is someone who is compassionate and has empathy for us. And he has been there too.
Well, I also think of how he was not well accepted among his own family members.
Mm-hmm.
So even his own brothers kind of scoffed at him and didn't believe that he truly was the Son of God. And so, and people in his own community, it said that he went there, but he couldn't do many miracles just because of their unbelief. And so I'm thinking in our situation too, Christmas is often portrayed as the time for families to get together. But when there's rift in family relationships, there's tensions. And for whatever reason, just sometimes it's just flat out misunderstandings that haven't been resolved well. Or maybe there are mental health issues going on in families that make it very difficult to have normal, healthy relationships. It may be because there's divorce, broken families like that. And it's just awkward sometimes to get together and to try to bridge those gaps. So families are not perfect. And at Christmas, we see these pictures and images or movies where families are portrayed as sitting around the tree and opening the presents in the morning, and everything is all good and well, and they're sipping their hot chocolate and it's all good. But that's just not the way families often are in real life. But to know that he gets that too, because he came from a family where there were tensions.
That is such a good point. And a lot of people are going through that right now where they're struggling with disillusionment, dysfunction, or completely being cut off from family members. I'm hearing a lot of grandparents say they're completely cut off from their grandkids, or siblings that are completely cut off from one another, parents cut off from their children, all kinds of things like that going on. And if you are experiencing that, knowing that you're not as alone as you feel can make a huge difference.
That's absolutely true. And in cases like that, where we where we wish our family was healthier. We wish we could get together and be that picture perfect family, but we know it's not going to happen. Then we can do things to get us out of a dark space in our thinking. There are practical steps that we can take in order to help ourselves, encourage ourselves in the middle of those hard places.
Oh, I would love to talk to you some more about how to encourage ourselves and how to take some practical steps to move from feeling despair at Christmas toward feeling stability, security, and experiencing hope at Christmas. So we are going to continue this conversation with a second part to this talk. And in the meantime, I would like for you to know where you can find Grace Fox in case you want to check her out really quick. What is your website, Grace?
It's super easy. It's gracefox.com.
And that's where you can find out more about her books, her speaking availability, and all kinds of other opportunities. Maybe get her newsletter. And her newest book, again, is Fresh Hope for Today, Devotions for Joy on the Journey. Grace, can you talk to us about some of the practical things that you have used or that you recommend for people to cling to just take one step at a time to get out of that darkness and move forward?
For sure. One of the things that I've done when I have not felt celebratory at Christmas is I fill my home with praise and worship music. I just do that because it moves my mind from the circumstances that are disappointing around me to the character of God. And that changes everything. When I switch my thinking from, oh, I wish Christmas looked different this year, oh, it's not at all what I expected or what I'd hoped, to God Almighty. God Almighty is the one who came down in human form to love me and to understand what I'm going through right now. So one, just fill my home with praise and worship music. And sometimes, like, there's a Christian radio station local to me, and I know they start playing Christmas music right after Thanksgiving, and they play it until about December 27th. And so sometimes I'll just turn that on and let it play. They just play uninterrupted on Christmas Day, one song after the next, after the next. And I've done that too, just to focus my thoughts. But another one is to look beyond ourselves. And times when Christmas hasn't looked like I wish it would look, because my kids live long distances away, all three of them. And even like last year, we tried to get together for Christmas, the two daughters, and one of them was driving 5 hours up, and ended up in a car accident on the way up and couldn't. They had to turn around and go back. And so we weren't able to celebrate Christmas together as we planned. And again, another disappointing Christmas. But to realize that there are a lot of people who are spending Christmas alone. And so we spent Christmas alone, but I'm realizing it doesn't have to be that way. We live in a neighborhood where there are a lot of single people in our marina, and to be able to just open the home in the later part of the afternoon, not to put on a big dinner per se, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but to say, hey, I'm going to bake something and let's have a special dessert, and I'm putting coffee and tea on. So would you like to come? And just to invite these singles in, if they truly are just sitting there at home by themselves and not going out to join somebody else, but to make a place for someone else to feel welcome, because they might be sitting home alone, disappointed as well.
I'm hearing 3 practical steps in what you just said. First, put something in your environment that matches where you want your mood to go, not necessarily where your mood is. And that might be Christmas music. For some people, Christmas music is not going to work for them at Christmas time. They may just not be able to do the Christmas music. If that's you, don't feel guilty about that. If you don't want to do praise and worship music right now, just do something very positive, something uplifting. Do what's going to set your mood where you want it to go. It's like a boat. You live on a boat. So we'll talk about that. There's kedging with a boat. You know what kedging is? It's to throw your anchor out when you're stuck and pull your boat forward. So you're kind of kedging your mood. You're throwing the anchor out and pulling your mood to where you want it to be. And the second thing I heard you say is to change your thoughts. And I'd like to dig into that a little bit more too. And the third thing I heard you say, which is super great advice, is to reach out to someone else who is languishing, who is lonely, who is suffering. And thinking outside of yourself can help pull you out of despair, even when and especially when you don't feel like it. So let's talk about that mindset piece, because I think that works its way into both of those other two as well. What are some tips to getting us to change our mindsets in order to find hope at Christmas?
Yeah, I think it's what we need to do if there's disappointment going on is to maybe take a step back and say, well, what was I expecting? What was I expecting my Christmas to look like? And then we can look at that and say, and this is what it actually looked like. And we can identify then the reason for why we feel disappointed. But to feel that, to allow ourselves to feel what we feel rather than saying, I shouldn't be feeling this way. What's wrong with me? To not do that. There's no shame. There's no guilt in that, but to just acknowledge it and to acknowledge what our expectations are. And sometimes when I've done that, I realize that I've had unrealistic expectations. It's no wonder I was disappointed. It's because my expectations were way beyond what could be met. And so it's good to be able to just take that step back and evaluate. I think in changing our thoughts, I love what you said, Tina, about putting something in our environment that moves us from where we are to where we want to be, rather than allowing us to remain stuck where we are. But when I have felt disappointed at Christmas, I think, all right, what do I need to do? What is it that's going to bring me joy? It's this Christmas isn't looking like what I thought it would look like, but what is it that will bring me joy? And you're right. I love what you said too about sometimes Christmas music just doesn't cut it for everybody. I've had Christmases like that. Like after my dad had his strokes, I didn't feel like playing Christmas music. I couldn't do it. It just didn't seem right at all. But what is it that brings us joy? And it might just be going for a walk. Just take that time and walk and talk with the Lord and just talk to him like a friend and express how you're feeling right now. But then turn it around and start thanking him for everything you can think of to be thankful for as well. Gratitude goes a long way in changing our thoughts and getting us out of a dark place.
Gratitude is so powerful. I thank you for mentioning that. And we won't feel like being grateful when we start counting what we have to be grateful for, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. But we have to do it even when we don't feel like it, because those hormones are released. The serotonin and dopamine those are released, and those are the hormones associated with pleasure and contentment. But even if we begin to express it, despite not feeling like it on the inside, those hormones will start to be released. And our body, our brain, it's all going to start working together, communicating that, hey, things aren't so bad after all. And we will start coming around in our hearts and our thinking and our attitude just by expressing gratitude.
Mm-hmm. And again, it's not an instant fix. It's a thing that takes a little bit of time. It is a process. That is important to recognize, giving yourself grace and time to get through that pain and that grief and that suffering, and know that it's important. I love the way you said, don't guilt yourself and shame yourself when you're already hurting. That's super important that people hear that we're not here to tell you what to feel or how long you should feel it or to get over it and simply get through. God is with us where we are in the midst of our mess and our pain to help strengthen us and sustain us on that journey through, knowing that it takes time to work through those things. Mm-hmm. He can help us survive that and get to the other side of it. And there's hope that there is another side of that. It just may not be an instant other side of that, right?
I think too, Tina, one other thought that comes to mind is, you know how we tie traditions in with Christmas? So many families have their own family traditions. And when there's been a change in the family situation, whether through loss or now there's a tension in the relationship and things are different, we have to allow ourselves to work through another process when it comes to traditions, I think, because for some people, maybe it's healing to continue the same traditions. But for other people, that might not be healing at all. In fact, for them, it might be better to find a new tradition to replace the old, because the old is just so painful to revisit without that loved one present. Or it's like we have to, again, give ourselves grace to work through that process of, do I want to do this tradition again, even though this person isn't around? And maybe it's okay to leave that tradition for several Christmases. It's okay to do that and then later come back to it. So there's nothing that has to be set in concrete about Christmas traditions. If they're just too painful to take part in at this time, then don't do them.
That is really great advice. And I think that's helpful and gives a lot of hope for some people who are listening out there. Grace, this has been such a powerful discussion. Do you have any final thoughts that you would like to leave with the audience?
I would just want to say to the audience that yes, Christmas can be a difficult time. But again, revisiting what we said earlier, that God in flesh came to live among us. He came so that he could understand our weaknesses and understand our hurts and our pains. And if this Christmas is a difficult one for you, know that you are not alone. Know that the Lord is walking with you. But I would also encourage you to just reach out to somebody else. Reach out. Don't spend Christmas alone in a place where you're feeling so lonely and it's like you don't even want to go on. You don't even know if you can get out of bed tomorrow morning. Don't let yourself sit in a place like that, but reach out to someone and see if you can't find someone else who needs a helping hand.
Thank you, Grace. And remind people where they can find you and get a copy of your book, Fresh Hope for Today, Devotions for Joy on the Journey, or perhaps one of your other 13 books that you have available.
Yeah, they're available wherever Christian books are sold, but you can come to my website, gracefox.com.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Grace, and thank you for listening. We pray that you will have blessings and hope this Christmas and beyond. And I hope that you will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant. Flourish-Meant is part of the Spark Media Network and can be found on the Edify app.